What do you think about ghost jobs? It's a question that hits harder than we'd like to admit, especially when the job market already feels like a maze with no exit signs. These mysterious openings that never lead anywhere spark frustration, confusion, and a whole lot of burned out hope. And today, we're diving right into the heart of that experience, not to complain, but to understand what's really going on beneath the surface. So let's pull back from the big picture and zoom in on one person's story, someone trying to make sense of why these postings exist in the first place, and what they're doing to people just trying to find work.
A user online expressed deep frustration with ghost jobs, those listings companies post even though they aren't planning to hire anyone. They called the trend disrespectful, harmful, and increasingly common, and asked others how it affects their industries and what could be done to stop it. From that vulnerable question comes a wave of personal stories and insider insights, each one adding another layer to this strange hiring phenomenon.
Just a quick welcome to Better Life FAQs. If you want more simple, practical answers like this, be sure to share, like, and subscribe. Now, let's continue.
First up is a comment that hits like a gut punch. This viewer spent 3 years unemployed, applied to thousands of jobs, and believes many of them were ghost listings, a trend they say exploded during the pandemic, just to keep investors impressed. This perspective lands with a heavy emotional weight because it captures a reality many people quietly endure. When someone spends years applying with almost no response, it doesn't just feel discouraging. It starts to warp your sense of possibility. The idea that companies used ghost jobs as a way to signal growth to investors adds a sharp corporate edge to an already painful experience. It reframes the job hunt from a personal challenge into a systemic dysfunction. Their anger is justified because realizing your efforts were poured into openings that never existed feels like a betrayal. It also exposes how companies sometimes prioritize optics over ethics. In an economy already strained, that choice amplifies the emotional toll on applicants. A hypothetical example might be an applicant spending hours crafting the perfect cover letter for a role that was never meant to be filled. That time can't be reclaimed, and the psychological hit compounds over months or years. This viewer's comment reminds us that ghost jobs aren't a minor inconvenience. They can reshape someone's entire trajectory. And while that story captures the exhaustion of false hope, the next viewpoint shifts towards something a bit more analytical.
Here, the frustration gets sharper, but also more strategic. This viewer says fake postings are bad enough, but interviewing candidates for a role that's already filled is even worse. Still, they use the experience to evaluate whether they'd ever work for that company in the future. This answer highlights a particularly painful form of ghosting, being brought into an interview process that was never meant to include you. It's the emotional equivalent of being invited to a party where no one notices you're there. The subtle betrayal comes from the time, preparation, and vulnerability that interviews require. Yet this viewer's response shows a surprising level of empowerment. They treat interviews as a two-way street, flipping the script and evaluating the company just as much as the company evaluates them. That mindset helps mitigate the sting of wasted effort. It also reinforces the idea that transparency is a core part of a healthy workplace culture. If a company can't be straightforward about hiring, what else might they hide? Imagining someone realizing after their third interview that they were never in consideration paints a clear picture of why trust breaks down. This comment nudges job seekers toward reclaiming agency, even within a flawed system. But what happens when someone sees this practice not from the outside, but from the inside?
Now we get an inside look from someone who actually watched ghost jobs being created. This viewer says their company used to post fake listings to build a candidate database, a manipulative policy pushed by a director who was eventually laid off. What makes this comment compelling is the rare peek into the internal mechanics of ghost hiring. Hearing from someone who tried to push back and couldn't adds a human dimension to a corporate-level decision. It shows how even well-intentioned employees can feel powerless under leadership that prioritizes metrics over ethics. The fact that this policy vanished as soon as the director was gone suggests that ghost jobs can often be tied to a single person wielding influence. The idea of posting roles purely to gather names sounds strategic on the surface, but it disregards the emotional investment of applicants. It's like sending out invitations to a wedding that isn't happening just to see who might show up. This example highlights how misaligned priorities can create widespread frustration for job seekers. A hypothetical situation would involve a company posting a role, receiving hundreds of applications, but never reviewing them because the position wasn't truly open. That kind of manipulation chips away at trust, not only externally, but internally as well. The commenter's relief at the policy ending illustrates how much these practices impact morale at every level. After hearing that insider view, another commenter zooms out to show just how long this issue has been simmering in the background.
Next, we meet someone who says ghost jobs are nothing new. They claim companies have been posting non-real openings for over a decade just to build massive pools of potential applicants for future needs. This viewpoint challenges the idea that ghost jobs are a recent invention. By framing them as a long-standing practice, the commenter suggests the problem is deeply embedded in hiring culture. From a business perspective, having a ready-made pool of candidates seems efficient, but from the applicant's perspective, it's emotionally draining and confusing. The asymmetry of information is the root issue. Companies know they aren't hiring, but applicants don't. This leads to an imbalance where one side benefits from convenience, while the other side suffers from wasted effort. It reveals how hiring has drifted toward being transactional rather than relational. A hypothetical example might be a company posting the same marketing assistant job every quarter, not because they need someone, but because they want a steady pipeline. That normalizes a behavior that should be questioned. The comment encourages us to consider how widespread and overlooked this practice has become. But just when the pattern seems clear, the final viewpoint brings a dose of skepticism to challenge the entire premise.
The last commenter raises an eyebrow at the whole idea. They question whether ghost jobs even exist, arguing they don't see the benefit companies would gain. This skepticism is helpful because it forces a deeper look at incentives. On the surface, it does seem strange for companies to advertise roles they don't intend to fill. But once you examine the corporate motivations, investor perception, talent mapping, internal budgets, hiring freezes, the logic becomes clearer. A listing isn't always about immediate hiring. Sometimes it's about appearances or data gathering. For job seekers, though, these explanations rarely soften the emotional blow. When you invest time and hope into a role that goes nowhere, your frustration remains justified regardless of the company's motives. This skepticism also highlights how opaque the job market has become. If even job seekers can't be sure what's real, the entire process loses credibility. A hypothetical situation would be a skeptic applying to 5 positions, getting no response, and still wondering if the jobs were real or simply poorly managed. Their doubt pushes us to explore the wider system rather than accepting the problem at face value. And with that last viewpoint, the conversation widens into something larger than ghost jobs alone.
Across all these perspectives, a clear theme emerges. Ghost jobs aren't just a hiring tactic. They're a symptom of a system drifting further from transparency and mutual respect.
At the heart of this discussion lies a simple truth. People want honesty. Whether a job is open, paused, frozen, or speculative, clarity saves everyone time and emotional energy. Ghost jobs erode trust, and rebuilding that trust requires more transparency from companies. Job seekers, meanwhile, can protect themselves by treating applications as tests of company culture, not just opportunities. Look for red flags, track patterns, and value your time as much as you value the job you're seeking. This problem won't vanish overnight, but the more we talk about it, the harder it becomes for companies to hide behind outdated practices. Change often begins with awareness, and awareness starts with conversations like this. As we gently step back from the frustration and emotion of these stories, there's space to breathe and reflect on what they reveal about today's job hunt.
Thanks for listening, and remember, your time, effort, and hope matter. If something feels off in a listing, trust your instincts. Keep advocating for yourself, and keep paying attention to the signals companies send. The job market may be messy, but you don't have to face it blindly. Until next time, take care of yourself and stay grounded.